So it is my great privilege and pleasure this afternoon to introduce our Chancellor, the Chancellor of Rutgers University, Newark, Dr. Nancy Cantor. You may remember this morning I spoke of the law school and the legal education that we provide being informed so much and really be directed by the community in which we are located. And I think it has been all of our experiences who went to law school that being part of the Newark community with its challenges and its aspirations really enriched our the quality of the legal education that we received and enabled us to better use our legal skills to promote the use of the law as an instrument for positive social change. That has been, I would say, an ever-present, although not always perfectly expressed, underlying purpose for Rutgers University, certainly in Newark and in Camden as well, and in New Brunswick. But since we're in Newark today, and since most of us are graduates of the law school program in Newark, it is particularly relevant. And as I said before, it was always an undercurrent, perhaps not perfectly expressed. Then came Dr. Nancy Cantor, who in her 4.5 years, has it been, years here, has taken what has always been that undercurrent that Rutgers University in Newark is part of, as we have said actually for a while, not only in Newark but of Newark, and has brought that expression with a new clarity and passion. And so I asked her before we go on in our program if she might say a few words to us about her vision for Rutgers University in Newark, and also how the law school can play its part in that vision. Nancy.
Thank you so much, Ron, and it is so amazing to look out here. I just cannot tell you what an honor it is to be part of this celebration of 50 years of MSP. The formation of MSP, along with the liberation of Conklin Hall, as you all know, quite literally set the stage for the university that we are today. A place, as we titled our strategic plan in 2014, where opportunity meets excellence. The generations of MSP graduates who've gone on to remake the face of the profession, and no matter what arena of practice or scholarship, to tilt it toward justice and the public interest, exemplifies our public institutional identity so clearly and so sustainably, standing, as we know today, the test of time, of 50 years and more to come. At the heart of the institutional identity of the MSP and Conklin and beyond that shaped this university and this law school is the understanding, though, that opportunity doesn't come in a vacuum, that cultivating the next diverse generation of leaders, professionals, citizens is a social enterprise, contextualized by the society in which we live and work. Universities don't shift the map of educational opportunity by looking inward as an ivory tower. And as an aside, I have always thought that that was appropriately colored as an anachronism. Rather, we change ourselves by connecting to the broader public and the broader world. We do it by looking outward to see the talent that otherwise would be sitting on the sidelines, and yet that surely represents the excellence of the future we're trying to educate and shape. We do it by eschewing what Lani Guinier called the tyranny of the meritocracy in her book of the same title. And we look instead expansively for those who will redefine where opportunity meets excellence, both as students and as scholars, precisely because they come from that broader world and care about remapping its landscape of all too durable inequalities, as Chuck Tilley wonderfully framed, the relentlessly persistent obstacles to justice still carved so deeply in this ground that is America. To say it simply, the mandate articulated 50 years ago in the founding of the MSP, and a resounding thank you is warranted for the faculty who issued that mandate and the community who cradled it for half a century. But that mandate carried with it an inextricable linking of educational opportunity and social responsibility. The responsibility as educators and scholars to work collaboratively in our cities and towns, near and far, to bridge those two Americas, as MLK Jr. defined the fundamental task of social justice at the same time 50 years ago. In other words, I would say that the lesson of the MSP is both about people, more diverse talent at the educator's table, and about place, more commitment as place-based institutions to use our expertise and to lend our voices in the world beyond the educator's table, in the service of public interest of social justice. Fast forward then to now, with full recognition that there's been nothing fast about the persistent striving for educational opportunity and for social justice, certainly in the urban America we inhabit and care deeply to remap in the face of that long arm of history. Certainly in Newark today and in Camden and so many other urban centers, we don't have to look far beyond our own institutional backyard to see the sequelae of racism and inequality that have continued to produce and reproduce those two Americas. As our colleagues and partners at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, Demel Zubair and Ryan Haygood, document in their analyses of employment and economic opportunity in this city and beyond. As they note, despite billions of dollars of investment in Newark today, and that, by the way, is a good thing, and multiple large corporate anchors who've stayed and or come to Newark, another good base to build on, Newarkers only hold 18% of the many thousands of local jobs, and 60% of the jobs in Newark are held by whites. A long way to go as we bridge the bridge of two Americas in Newark, as we create opportunity here and elsewhere. Certainly our public schools must be at the foundation of those bridges, and yet New Jersey schools are the 5th most segregated in the country as I look out at our colleague Paul Trachtenberg, Elise, Boddie, and others who work on this. So those people working in the thousands of jobs in corporate America in Newark are driving out of Newark at night to contribute to more substantial tax bases of higher performing suburban schools, leaving the cities with that pattern of double segregation by race and class that Gary Orfield and Paul and others have written about. These divisions are only solidified, if not produced, by the persistence of an architecture of segregation, as our Camden colleague Paul Jaworski documented in his 2015 report for the Century Foundation. An architecture created by decades of housing policies and practices, de jure and de facto, as Richard Waustein brilliantly analyzes in his recent treatise on the color of law. And on the ground, life in these highly under-resourced neighborhoods and schools makes for a tough existence for families and children, already ravaged by unequal patterns of mass incarceration, juvenile justice and disciplinary practices that hit hard and eat away at the next generation's chances. Not to mention the scarcity of inclusive social services for children with disabilities and the constant vulnerability of our substantial undocumented population. So this urban map, of which Newark is a prototype, but I would argue not an exceptional one in our state and beyond, defines the contours of the prodigious task ahead of bridging the two Americas. And yet it also speaks precisely to the value proposition, to be blunt, of the traditions established and fed for 5 decades at Rutgers Law, and energized every year with new talent produced by MSP, as we saw this morning, and across the university. This then is both the wake-up call of reality and the promise it holds if we continue to strive for opportunity and justice. In Newark, as in Camden, that is precisely the promise we are committed to paying forward as we roll up our scholarly and educational sleeves and collaborate expansively with public and private sector partners, with City Hall, with the many nonprofits in this great city, as an anchor institution in it for the long haul. An anchor institution committed to high impact, publicly engaged scholarship and to educating the next diverse generation of change makers. And we take seriously, as Ron said, that we're not just in Newark, but we are of Newark. We take seriously that, and we look back to the words of a renowned Newarker, Rabbi Prince, who spoke in 1963. He gave the speech right before Martin Luther King Jr. and the March on Washington. It's often not heard because it was right before the amazing Martin Luther King Jr. speech, but you should try to go online and listen to it. It's a remarkable speech. And what Rabbi Prince said is really the identity for us. He said, neighbor is not a geographic term. It's a moral responsibility. And we take it to heart in everything we do, from serving as the backbone organization for the 60-plus partners in the Newark City of Learning Collaborative, working to increase the percentage of Newark residents with post-secondary degrees, to increasing the representation of Newark residents in our undergraduate population by 59% in the last 4 years. Can we have a round of applause for that? And committing in our Run to the Top program to support with full last-in scholarships any resident of Newark with an adjusted family income of $60,000 or below who comes as an undergraduate here. And then, by the way, they'll go on to law school, right? We work with our remarkable Mayor, Raz Baraka, truly remarkable, to mobilize anchors across the city to embrace a hire by live local policies and practices, with goals to hire 2,020 Newarkers across an impressive array of anchor institutions, from Rutgers to United Airlines to PSE&G and Prudential and Audible and more. And Marcia Brown personally lines them up every Friday to get their tally of how many they've hired. And you know what a dean she was, so you know what, you know. Kevin Lyons in our business school has done an amazing analysis of how, if those anchors increase the amount of procurement they do locally from $30 million a year to $200 or $400 million a year, it can be done with the existing women, minority-owned entrepreneurs and manufacturing companies in Newark. $400 million a year annually, local procurement would be a big boon to our local businesses. And then our mayor strongly relies on the expertise sitting right here, and you'll hear about it in a few minutes. He relies, for example, on an amazing report that our very own David Troutt did of what citywide equitable growth would look like. as Raz says all the time, we're not the new Brooklyn, we're the new Newark. And David's got the recommendations to make that happen. The citywide Safer Newark Council engages our scholars in criminal justice and law and social work and psychology to map out high concentration crime areas, to look at reentry programs that work, to look at juvenile justice interventions with evidence-based data. We think collaboratively in all this work. So Newark has, ever since the Newark Rebellion, phenomenal network of CBOs, a network of Newark Community Development Corps that we work hand in glove with, because universities can't tell cities how to do things. Universities have to be with cities. We have to create what I like to call a community of experts, with and without pedigrees. And the ones without are pretty good at doing this. They know how to make change. And then, the minute we get discouraged that there's so many hills to climb on this, just take a walk over to Haynes, the redeveloped Haynes building, and after you eat at Marcus Samuelson's BP, go upstairs to Express Newark, our 50,000 square foot university community arts collaboratory, where the voices, the reminders of both how many hills we have to climb, who's vulnerable, but who's talented and deserves to climb those hills. Listen to the stories of the newest Americans produced at Haynes in Express Newark that tells us why immigration policy as it's being defined in Washington is ridiculous. That's another generation of hills to climb. That's what MSP was all about. That's what we're about. And speaking of making progress, I've outlined these citywide collaborative initiatives really just as a backdrop to the remarkable work of our law school social justice champions. I've been associated with a lot of law schools. I spent half my life on Gratz and Grutter. But you know what? Those Michigan law, they have nothing compared to you as social justice heroes. Nothing. This is the place where we can know that if we dig deep, collaboratively and wide, and look for talent and produce it as we are, that we will make a difference in empowering our communities for prosperity, fairness, and equity. We'll fight for disability rights. We'll protect immigrant families. We'll desegregate our schools and neighborhoods once and maybe not forever, but we'll make that progress. We'll support prisoner reentry and reasonable juvenile justice reform. We'll secure affordable housing, and we'll uncover those implicit biases that undergird all the discrimination at the center of so much of what has held us back. They will speak more forcefully than I can about how the traditions set in motion 50 years ago are rippling forward with what I like to call the multiple generations out in the world, taking the messages beyond that ivory tower, turning that ivory tower and not ivory, and where it belongs, out there in the world, on the street, in the neighborhoods, in the schools, in the prisons, in the institutions, in the courts, in all the places where change needs to happen. MSP set that in motion, and we will keep that tradition going. And we are honored to have a little piece of bridging those two Americas. So let's hear now from the experts about what building the bridges of opportunity and excellence mean right here, right now, and for another 50 years to come. Thank you.
as I said before, now you hear what the perfect expression of what Rutgers University Newark does is like. It's now my great honor to call up a number of my colleagues who will be led by Professor Jon Dubin, each of whom will speak as briefly as a law professor can speak, I suppose, about what the law school is doing now in the community to champion social justice. So, Jon, are you ready to?
While they're all getting ready and coming up here, I'll just start talking because we do have such limited time. So let me start by thanking Chancellor Cantor for that inspiring vision of what Rutgers is now. Let's get another round of applause for Chancellor Cantor. It certainly inspires all of us. But as I said, a vision of Rutgers now, and while we're celebrating 50 years of the path-breaking MSP program, which has figuratively and literally changed the complexion of the New Jersey bar, let us not forget how we got here. MSP was part of a response to the reality that we were an institution at the time, 50 years ago, which was not meaningfully engaged in and of our surrounding disproportionately African American community, not immersed in the pressing social justice struggles of the times in our communities of color, struggles which triggered the nationally significant Newark Community Rebellion in the summer of '67. And I thank Chancellor Cantor again for her detailed explication of the role of an anchor institution now and the importance of furthering social justice and serving as a community partner in our current mission and her unwavering and bold support of that mission and vision. Our next group of speakers follow in that tradition and mold. They are advocates and doers and community-engaged scholars who are all focusing important aspects of their work on advancing social justice in Newark and Camden and underserved communities in our state and beyond. Most of my colleagues up here are involved in teaching and lawyering in clinical programs, which are engaged in direct client and client group representation right in our communities. A few of my other colleagues are heading or engaged in interdisciplinary centers and projects focusing on issues of discrimination, bias, or inequity affecting our communities and affecting society at large. And as to my clinical colleagues in clinical work, I would be remiss not to mention the close historical relationship between MSP and our nationally renowned, diverse, and award-winning clinical program. I can't help that, I gotta say that. In the 1960s, almost no law schools had clinics. It just wasn't part of the educational canon then. And the very few law schools that did thought, you know, maybe this would be a neat little thing to do for skills training. We'll have mock trial, moot court, and a clinic. Do a few real cases. That's not our history here at Rutgers. We have clinics here because MSP students demanded them. In 1969, if you look at Paul Trachtenberg's excellent overview of the history in your brochure here, pages 20 to 22, you'll see that history. MSP students in '69 prepared an indictment of the law school's educational program and essentially shut the school down for a day, demanding more socially relevant legal educational experiences that would provide students the tools to advance the social, legal, and economic development needs of their communities and communities of color. They wanted a legal education which was not simply a cookie-cutter commercial or private practice book learning education, but one which folks could bring back to advance justice and economic and social progress at home. And the product of the school shutdown was the creation of a law school commission and then a published report with a blueprint calling for a large program of clinics and projects at the law school, which would engage students in the full range of legal and social justice issues of the day. A blueprint which we still follow to this day, 48 years later. And I just spoke with Lennox Hines a few minutes ago. Lennox, are you here? Lennox is in the back. Stand up, Lennox. We all owe a debt of gratitude to Lennox Hines as the principal author of that indictment. We are all here on this stage because of Lennox Hines and the courageous and bold and persistent MSP students who demanded these experiences. So in the limited time we have, our panel of a dozen or so of my colleagues will now each discuss a tidbit of the community-engaged social justice advancing work they're doing. I've asked them all to answer the following question: how has your work sought to advance Rutgers' mission as an anchor institution in surrounding communities and/or promote community engagement or community partnerships? So let me get off the stage now, as I've used up more time than I should have, and let them speak. Thank you.
I'm a proud graduate of the MSP program, class of '81, yay! And I am happy to say that I got my start in the clinical program at Rutgers, and fire was put into me for social justice. I wasn't always an educator of children, nor was I ever involved with children's rights. I got my start as a public defender, where I learned how to litigate by being thrown into the fire pit. And as a result of that, it prepared me for the journey in children's rights, especially children's rights with disability. This is an area where our children are very sorely disadvantaged. Our clinic has been an anchor in many ways. We have been a trainer of many people and sowed many seeds in this state regarding the rights of children with disabilities and how it intersects with the juvenile justice system, how it intersects with child welfare, how it intersects with in many matters, including trauma. So we have become an expert in this area throughout the state of New Jersey, and always are called upon as an expert to educate judges, child welfare, juvenile justice, and anyone who calls upon us. This morning, I was at a juvenile justice summit giving a seminar to parents. So one of our focus also is to ensure that our parents are empowered once we have represented them to go out and to be able to educate themselves so that they can represent their own children and their own children's needs. We have been the voice of the children of Newark, East Orange, and many parts of North Jersey where children are underserved. We have developed programs and initiatives that advance the rights of children. We have developed programs involving the school to prison pipeline. We have navigated many systems throughout the state, including the Essex County Minority Victimage Concern with Judge Elise, who's here today. We have developed programs with the School of Criminal Justice and many other programs throughout the state, serving as a resource in many ways. We are the last resorts for the children of Newark and urban areas, and in many cases, we have met the needs. We do need more money. For those out there who wants to give us some more money, we do need more money. But Jenny, my partner, is going to talk to you about one of the initiatives that she has developed. But we serve a need that is unmet in this state, and we hope to continue to do the work that we do to advance the needs of these children and to continue to sow the seeds of justice in this country. Oh, my name is Esther Canty-Barnes. Thank you, Yvette. I'm the director of the Education and Health Law Clinic. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jenny Rosen Valverde, and I have the privilege of co-teaching in the Education and Health Law Clinic with Professor Canty-Barnes. I'm going to talk just for a couple of minutes about a program that grew out of the Education and Health Law Clinic called HEAL Collaborative. But before I talk briefly about what HEAL does and how we do it, I just want to talk about why we have HEAL. I don't think that anyone in this room would disagree with the idea that health is a shared value, and that too often people living in low-income households have poor health outcomes because their environmental, economic, social, and legal issues go unaddressed. I think everybody would also agree that social justice principles mandate that society address the causes of poor health problems and health inequity, both from a preventive focus as well as a treatment focus. And this, we all know, needs a multidisciplinary, community-engaged, community-involved approach. And that's why we have HEAL. So how do we address the non-medical causes of poor health problems for children and families in Greater Newark area? Through collaborative education, collaborative learning, collaborative service, and collaborative systems and policy change. What does that look like? Well, basically what we're trying to do is add new tools to the healthcare toolkit. So we add legal and social care to the healthcare toolkit, and we add community participation to the healthcare toolkit, which to date has been far too often ignored. What does that look like? Take, for example, a family who comes in and the parent tells the doctor, you know what, I'm about to lose my house. I can't pay for my rent anymore. Well, we could go in there and we could just simply address the housing issue, but if we don't start tracing back the causes and the causes of the causes to figure out maybe this really has nothing to do with housing, it has to do with the fact that there's a child with a disability who's routinely being expelled from school or suspended because of their behaviors. So then the parent had to leave their job, could not work, lost their income, ended up where they are. So we focus on individual children and families, but we also do community systems work. So we partner with places like the Greater Newark Healthcare Coalition, Newark Public Schools, Special Education Parent Advocacy Committee, on larger initiatives to address not just from a bottom-up approach, but also from a top-down approach. For those of you who are more interested in hearing about HEAL, I'm happy to talk about it during the break. Thank you.
So good afternoon. My name is Elise Boddie. I'm a professor here at Rutgers Law School, but before I joined Rutgers, I litigated civil rights cases at the Legal Defense Fund. I'm going to talk a little bit about my work doing not desegregation, but equitable integration, and there's a very important distinction. But I want to tell just a quick story. In 2004, I was speaking at a conference in Delaware. It was the 50th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education. I was heading the education group at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, which was responsible for arguing Brown. And the person who introduced me mentioned that I lived in New Jersey. And after the event, the state president of the New Jersey NAACP came up to me and said, "Who the hell are you?" I said, I live in New Jersey too, and we've got some issues in New Jersey. And the irony was that I was traveling all over the country talking about Brown versus Board of Education, and yet we had this very stark segregation right in my backyard. And so I didn't know, actually, I'm ashamed to say, how starkly segregated New Jersey was. And it really wasn't until 2013 when I came to Rutgers and Paul Trachtenberg, and Paul, just wave your hand a little so everybody can celebrate you. I really learned from Paul reading the reports that he produced about how segregated New Jersey actually is. And it might seem odd to talk about segregation in New Jersey. People think segregation, that's so 1950s. Right, and that's so southern, right? New Jersey is not a segregated state, but as the Chancellor mentioned, New Jersey is actually the 5th most segregated state in the country. We have pockets of extreme racial and class isolation in New Jersey, although as a forthcoming report by Paul Trachtenberg will show, there is a lot of opportunity to do equitable integration in the state. We have, in New Jersey, ironically enough, the best state law in the country, on integration. And why this matters is that school segregation is the epicenter of inequality. It is the nerve center of inequality. It drives family outcomes, it drives neighborhood outcomes, it drives individual outcomes, and it's critically important that we address it. So in terms of my own work, I got a seed grant from the Chancellor to do some work going around Essex County and talking to people about this issue and trying to test awareness of the issue and figure out what might be done just on a policy level. Quickly came to the conclusion that that was probably not likely to happen on a policy level. Essex County, by the way, where we sit, Camden and Essex County are neck and neck for the most segregated county in the 5th most segregated state in the country. And so part of what I realized is that there's not a lot of awareness around the issue of school segregation and why it's important. And so what I have done in the period since then is to operate on 2 fronts. So one is I'm a founding trustee of an organization called the New Jersey Coalition for Diverse and Inclusive Schools, which will formally launch on May 17th. That's significant. That's the anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education, so stay tuned for that. But I've also, under the auspices of my Rutgers work at the Inclusion Project, also funded by the Chancellor, we are out, I've been able to work with a couple of different people through the funds that were provided. We're out in Newark, we're out all over the state, talking to people, faith leaders, community organizers, high school students, business people, civic leaders, about the importance of this issue. And we're trying to connect it with issues, education issues that people care about, so that they can understand why school segregation is so important. If you care about academic achievement, you've got to address school segregation. If you want to improve economic opportunity for individuals and families, you've got to talk about school segregation, health outcomes, and the like. So Jon Dubin is holding up this big sign that says, "Time's up." So time's up, but stay tuned. But time's not up on this issue, so it's not up. So stay tuned. All right.
Okay, I'm going to wreck the microphone height for a minute. Good afternoon, I'm David Troutt, and it's really a pleasure to be back in this room. I'm a professor of law here at the law school and have been for 22 years. It's been a long time since I've had occasion to address a crowd in this room, where I started as a law professor in 1995. So it's wonderful to be with you and to share 2 of the frustrations and insights of being a law professor. One is that your scholarship does not do nearly as much as you hope it would do. It may not be read, it may not be taken seriously, it is not necessarily a vehicle for impact. People like Jon Dubin have been writing about the color of law, to which we currently talk about Matthew Desmond or Richard Rothstein, but Jon Dubin's been writing about it for 30 years, I've been writing about it for 20 years, Rachel Godsil, Elise, has been writing about it for decades. And so it's simply not enough to produce good scholarship that analyzes the various ways in which segregation works to cripple opportunities, typically by race, but increasingly by place. And the second insight that I learned through great frustration is whatever we do is multidisciplinary if it ever has a hope of impacting the lives we care so much about and which animate the work in the first place. And so about 6 years ago, taking both of these insights and moving from my beloved Brooklyn to New Jersey, finally, I started something called CLIMB, which is the Center on Law, Inequality, and Metropolitan Equity. It is a law school-based center. Its focus is on structural inequality, and by that I mean place-based inequality. You often hear people talk about that. You may understand place as the repository of racial and economic disparities and discrimination. Well, what we really mean by that in a legal sense is that place, the strength, the relative strength, the resources devoted to institutions that help to create opportunities for people beyond the family are very much informed and invested in the resources of the places where they operate. And so if you look at institutional rules in different places and you look at the degree of resources available to them, you then tend to understand why the outcome, the disparate outcomes are as they typically are. And so that was really the birth, the intellectual birth of CLIMB. It was important to bring in a multidisciplinary focus. We, in the first few years, started with the graduate school and had faculty from all different departments across the university. And then a wonderful thing happened. We got support from this wonderful Chancellor, Nancy Cantor, whose strategic vision of the anchor institution within the community was very much in line with Climb's. And so we continued the work. We began a housing study of Newark back in about February of last year, and then got a wonderful call from the mayor himself. And the mayor of Newark, Ras Baraka, asked, can you help us in our plans to distribute some of the benefits from the downtown boom that we're beginning to experience to the outer neighborhoods and those most distressed neighborhoods within them? And that began about a 9-month process, beginning about this time last year, in which we reinterpreted the question as a question of how does a city poised to gain resources it didn't used to have engage its institutions in a process of concerted, equitable growth? How does a city like Newark do what San Francisco and New York and Boston and DC could not do? How does a city grow without displacing Newarkers? And that was the essence of the work. And ultimately, on October 27th, we finished our recommendations. We reported to the mayor and his executive staff about 32 recommendations that run through about 5 major areas of life in the city, from reducing the risk of displacement to how to energize some of the neighborhood revitalization programs that are already underway, and of course with a focus on housing. You can see all these things on our website, climb.newark.rutgers.edu, or on our blog, because the report, I should say, that culminates all of this work was just finished. It's due for release on Monday, but it's available to you now on endinequality.com. Thank you.
Since this is all about collaboration, we're coming up here together. My name is Anjum Gupta. I direct the Immigrant Rights Clinic here at the Newark campus, and I just wanted to talk about a couple of our projects. The first is one that was very generously funded initially by Chancellor Cantor, and since the President's office has actually also continued to support the project. And this was a project that was initially proposed to address the influx of youth from Central America escaping, as we know, horrible violence and seeking just a better life and protection. So with this funding, we were able to hire a staff attorney who provided representation to these children because contrary to what our assistant chief immigration judge thinks, you cannot teach immigration law to a 3 or 4-year-old and expect them to represent themselves. That is real, look it up. So Sam, our lawyer, has been representing these children in their proceedings and also doing a lot of community education around forms of relief for these children. That was before the election. Of course, after the election, I think it's safe to say that that project has expanded somewhat. So she now also provides, along with our students, of course, community education and services around DACA, the DACA program, which, as we know, is under threat at the moment. And also, we represent kids in their DACA renewal applications. Again, that was a project that could not have been possible without the support of our deans and the chancellor and the president, and I think it just goes to show the commitment of not only this law school, but the larger university toward these social justice issues. Another aspect of that project was some policy work that we are doing in conjunction or in collaboration with the American Friends Service Committee here in Newark, involving increasing access to city services to immigrants based on language barriers, right? So enhancing language access for cities' immigrants to be able to access these very critical services. And then finally, I just wanted to mention some of our work also goes beyond the local community and more nationally. You may have heard recently that Attorney General Jeff Sessions has been taking these extraordinary steps to certify immigration decisions to himself and change them. Recently, and quite shockingly, he took a decision, and it seems that he is trying to remove asylum for domestic violence victims, potentially even victims of any type of private harm or private crime, including gang violence, religious-based persecution, lots of different things. A couple of weeks ago, I was asked to take the lead on authoring an amicus brief on behalf of law professors nationwide, arguing against this, and despite the timing in the semester, of course, I jumped at the chance and asked many of my students, both in the clinic and in my refugee law course, if they would help on a volunteer basis without any credit or research stipend or anything, and they all jumped at the chance and have been absolutely incredible. And the brief, even though the brief is due during exam period, so I think it also goes to show the commitment of our students to address these larger social justice issues.
Hi, I'm Joanne Gottesman, and I direct the Immigrant Justice Clinic in the Camden location. And I first have to say what a pleasure it is to come to Newark for fun, because I usually come to Newark when I'm going to 970 Broad Street to Immigration Court. So I've been lucky enough to be involved in several collaborations that highlight not only how Rutgers is an anchor institution in its local communities, but also statewide, and how through collaboration, I think we can become an even stronger anchor. So one of the projects that I'll talk about is a collaboration with Professor Randy Mandelbaum, who directs the Child Advocacy Clinic in Newark, and the other is with both Professor Mandelbaum and with Professor Gupta. So Randy and I began to work together several years ago because of our shared interest in advocating for the rights of immigrant children, initially by co-teaching a class in the holodeck on child migration, which involved a spring break trip to Guatemala with law students. And we came together because of her career as a child advocate, and I came to this course and this topic through my background in immigration law. And in 2016, we were approached by an attorney serving in a newly created position within the Department of Children and Families, an immigration legal specialist. And she was tasked with figuring out how the department could best meet the immigration needs of children in their care. And after a few months on the job, she approached us and said, would Rutgers Law School consider providing immigration representation to children in foster care? And with campuses in the North and the South and clinical professors specializing in both immigration law and child advocacy, she recognized that Rutgers was uniquely positioned to provide this service statewide. And so we started a pilot project in the spring of 2016 with 2 part-time attorneys, one on each campus, who were supposed to serve 40 children. Well, within 4 months, we had surpassed that number, and we hired another full-time attorney, and the project has now grown such that in 2017, we had 3 full-time attorneys and a full-time paralegal, and we served over 200 children from 22 different countries and from almost every county in New Jersey. I couldn't find one from Cape May or Sussex. So occasionally I catch myself when I realize that the systems are now in place for Rutgers Law School to represent every immigrant child in foster care in New Jersey. So we're not just an anchor institution for Newark or Camden, but for the state. And more importantly, we're an anchor for immigrant children who have been buffeted by the seas of abuse and neglect. And that is a pretty good feeling. And a second statewide collaboration also highlights Rutgers' role as an anchor in stormy seas. After the 2016 election, in the face of tremendous anxiety both on and off campus about the new administration's immigration policies, the law school, Professor Gupta, Mandelbaum, and I, and the deans asked President Barchi to fund a staff attorney position to represent our students in their immigration matters. and to enable the university to provide a rapid response to changing immigration policies that affect both our campuses and the surrounding communities. And he said yes, and that led to the creation of the Rutgers Immigrant Community Assistance Project, RICAP, because you gotta have an acronym, led by Jason Hernandez, who has consulted with and represented our students on all 3 campuses and has provided over 30 presentations to community groups in the fall semester alone. And we just learned 2 days ago that Professor Barchi, along with Chancellors Cantor and Haddon, have agreed to fund RICAP for a 2nd year, and we are grateful for the ongoing support and look forward to embarking on the 2nd year of the fight. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Victoria Pratt. Some of you know me as Judge Pratt, as the former Chief Judge of the Newark Municipal Court. I am now a professor here. I will speak quickly because I need to get all of this in. First, I want to give a special shout out to Dean Jan and Dean Marcia and Dean Chen for MSP class of 98, that's what I am, but for teaching me that I was expected to go into the justice system and turn it on its head. I am known for my work in community court, which provides alternative sentencing to low-level offenders. So instead of sending them to jail, they get services and they get community service, and you also engage the community to save itself. I'm also known for my work in procedural justice, which is a concept that says if people believe that they are treated with dignity and respect by the court, and that they are treated fairly in the process, not only do they comply with the law and court orders, but it also increases trust in the system. I'm going to tell this quick story because it happened yesterday, and when it happened, I was like, it was for today. I got an award yesterday, and when I walked in, this woman literally jumped on me. She kissed my dress, and I looked at her, and she said, "Judge Pratt, you saved my life." And when I looked at her, well, she was a woman who had sat in my court about a year ago for the whole session. At the end, I said, "Do you need something, ma'am? Because you don't have a case." She says, "I just came back to say thank you. I've been clean for 5 years. You sent me to a program. You saved my life. And now I have my medication so she could treat her bipolar disorder." She had been a heroin-addicted prostitute in our community for over 20 years. The reason I tell this story is that she is now in recovery. But at this event, every politician who was in the room knew her. Why? Because she has been fully restored to our community. She literally helped get people elected. She worked on the Murphy campaign. And I was sitting there just thinking about what happens when you have a partner like Rutgers. So I have to kind of answer the question in reverse, because when you have an anchor university like Rutgers, you actually get to not only do this work, but also to scale it out. So as a result of working with Rutgers, our community court not only got social work students so that we could serve more people, because we could actually give them a caseload and put more people into the program, Rutgers also created a fellowship so that we got a student at the courthouse 3 days a week identifying people who were in custody or who walked into court. So we had students walking up to tough guys saying, "Listen, this is an opportunity to get out of jail," and convincing them to take the alternative. We also had the work that was done at Rutgers for violence reduction helped us start and get a grant for a hotspots program where we were actually able to use formerly incarcerated folks to go out into the community and bring them in and get them services as well. We had a law student, a law student do research on how open bench warrants impact people in Newark. This was all pre-bail reform, so that judges could now begin to think about what it means when you actually give somebody a warrant, how it impacts their lives on a daily basis. We also were able to use interns to work with our youth court, which was amazing, to actually have people come into the youth court process and start to develop a different idea. I now go around the state, around the country, and actually outside of the state, talking to judges about what happens when we restore humanity to the process, and using Rutgers as the basis for this. I'll be in the Ukraine next week. Everyone said it's going to be safe, but people are really interested in what you do. And I'm actually going to be at one of the universities also talking to them about partnering with the justice system to make this happen. So again, this work doesn't happen without a partner like Rutgers, and also a partner that has now given me an opportunity to go around and talk about not only can you do this, but you should do this, and that yes, we should met out punishment, but should we use punishment to hurt or to heal? Thank you.
Good morning, my name is Sandra Simpkins, and I'm gonna go first and then Laura's gonna go second. But I have to say, I remember the day I got offered to open a clinic at Rutgers Camden Law School, and I called Laura and I said, this is gonna be so cool, because you're in the North and I'm in the South, and we can do great things for kids across the state of New Jersey. And that is what I think we've done. I'm really proud of what we've accomplished for the past 8 years. The first thing we did was identify gaps in legal services for kids. And one of the gaps we noticed is that when a kid leaves the courtroom, they no longer have access to counsel. So when they go into a juvenile placement facility, they don't have visitation and frequent access. So we wrote a grant and received a MacArthur grant in 2008 to fill this legal gap, which was really cool. The first client I ever met as a result of this grant was a young man named Troy. He was 16 years old. And I'll never forget the first day I met him. I had been a public defender for a long time, already 15 years. I thought I had seen a lot, but I had never seen anything quite like this. I remember him walking toward me. He was shackled in 3 places. He didn't have clothes. Instead, he was wrapped in this Ferguson gown thing, and there were numerous self-mutilation marks up and down his arms. When I spoke to Troy, he said he had been in the box for 6 months, without school, without books, without sheets for his bed. Again, I thought this couldn't be true, but in fact it was. And in 2008, it was permitted to keep children in indefinite solitary confinement. Fortunately for Troy, his case was a catalyst for a lot of change in New Jersey. I am quite certain that had it not been for the law school serving as an anchor institution and the collaboration that we have between both law schools, Troy's case would not have been able to create the kind of change that it has. It's extremely important, this concept of a law school as an anchor in the community. And because of the extraordinary collaboration between my clinic and Professor Cohen's, we have literally, I think, changed some of the landscape of juvenile justice across New Jersey. First through the Indigent Defense Action Network, and then through a New Jersey juvenile justice advocacy group. I want to also give a shout out to the deans of the law school, because as this was going on, things got messy. It was complicated. Whenever you're taking on issues like this, it is uncomfortable. And I have to say it was extraordinary to get such unqualified support from both deans from the law school while this process was going on. To hear more about the other achievements, I'm going to turn it over to Professor Cohen.
Thanks, Sandra. One of the joys and privileges of my life has been to have this collaboration with Sandra Simpkins. It has enriched my, my sense of professionalism. It has enriched my ability to serve the children in New Jersey, and I think it has definitely enriched our students to have this collaboration. So I'm so grateful to you, and also for you for being here today. So as Sandra said, we embarked on this journey together in 2008, and it was actually a journey that we had started a little bit before that. I have to say that in addition to Rutgers being an anchor institution and an anchor for this work that we have done together, it has been a port in the storm now for over 600 children who our clinics together have represented. Children who come from Newark, who come from Camden, who come from other communities of color in this state, and make no mistake about it, there are no white children incarcerated in this state. None. 90% of the children overall who are committed to state custody are African American or Latino, and if you look at who is actually in the prisons, the secure facilities, you do not see a white child there. So in providing this legal representation to children who had never had it before, who were thrown into this black hole, we deliberately and specifically embarked on battling the immorality of mass incarceration in this state with a recognition that it starts with what we do to our youth. So when we opened this trap door, when we looked in this black hole, here's what we found. We found that at the time we started this project, there were over 300 children incarcerated in secure prisons that look like prisons in this state. Those kids had been committed by the juvenile court for terms of years that in many ways mirror what adults face for similar crimes. New Jersey has some of the longest terms of incarceration for children in the country. And by throwing them into this hole and shutting that trap door without access to counsel, there were innumerable legal needs that these children had. And so over the years, we have represented children like Troy in cases involving institutional abuse, kids who were beat up by corrections officers, kids who had injuries resulting from fights with other children. We have battled and actually achieved victory on the front of solitary confinement of children. When we started, it was daily practice for children to be sent into solitary confinement for offenses as minor as talking back to a teacher. Today, in large part because of the work that we did with kids in throwing the light onto these practices, punitive solitary confinement is outlawed in this state. We have advocated for our clients to ensure that they receive the education to which they are entitled, the mental health services to which they are entitled. In another collaboration with Professors Gottesman and Mandelbaum, we are helping our clients who are immigrants achieve status and remain in this country after they are released from custody. We have helped them with reentry. We have helped them with parole revocation and advocacy. We have helped them with family engagement to ensure that they actually have some contact with their parents while they're away. Imagine that. Imagine sending a 16-year-old away for 6 years and not making provision for them to see their parents. In short, we are attacking the profound harms and the fundamental immorality of mass incarceration. We've done this with a lot of support. I have to echo Sandra in thanking our deans. Dean Chen has been a rock with regard to this, and it has not been easy. We are attacking state practices, and he has been 1,000% behind us, and I am so grateful to him for that. None of this would have been possible without the amazing students who have come through our clinics over the years, many of whom were part of the MSP program. So thank you to all the MSP deans who are here, current and former, for bringing those students to us. They have just been amazing. And we have also done it with the help of community partners who are part of the fabric of this community. The Institute for Social Justice, the ACLU of New Jersey, Advocates for Children of New Jersey, all of whom have staff members who are graduates of and affiliated with this law school. So we have so much to be proud of with regard to what the advocacy community in this state looks like, and they have been an incredible source of support to us in this work. Jon is giving me the time's up. You know what? Time is up, because as long as there is a child incarcerated in what looks like a prison in this state, as long as we are keeping kids out of their communities, as long as we are perpetuating the evils of mass incarceration on the backs of our children, we have not achieved what we need to achieve. So time is up. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Charles Auffant. I'm a clinical professor of law, proud MSP graduate of 1982. And, you know, I have to start off with giving thanks to the MSP deans, most recently Dean Bravo Weber. Every year, she's given me the privilege of addressing the incoming MSP class. I invite them to go to that place where the books are. They have to explain what a book is these days. But we have portraits of every graduating class in our library. And I urge them to just go look at those pictures, because those pictures are very different from what our MSP class looks like. I remind them how, because of the people of Newark in 1967 who spilled their blood, we are here. I was fortunate enough to come here. Our program is baptized in the blood of the people of Newark and other places where the civil rights struggle took place. As an MSP alum, I tell them that we have a duty that I share and that we all share, to continue those struggles for civil rights and justice. I accept that duty, as I'm sure you do. I'm lucky in that, working in the community and transactional lawyering clinic, I get to bring that to my work every day. The community and transactional lawyering clinic is the school's first primarily transactional clinic. As all our clinics, we work every day to fulfill that duty to the people of Newark. The clinic was founded by my colleague, Robert Holmes, who couldn't be here today. I tried to get his 3 minutes, but John wouldn't let me have that. And I'm sure you're happy about that. We represent local startup small businesses. That's where development, that's where redevelopment begins. We also represent local nonprofits with all their startup legal needs. It's our belief that if we can free these institutions, these businesses, these not-for-profits of their legal needs, that will give them time to concentrate on their mission. And these missions are varied, from mentoring Newark youth to working with statewide nonprofit organizations designed to fight homelessness among young people, to international causes. One of our clients we represented and continue to represent started a group, and they now have 3 schools for indigenous women in the Sacred Valley of Peru that give them an opportunity to come down from the mountains, have a place to live so they can attend high school. Our work also extends to representing alleged incapacitated persons in proceedings before the Superior Court. We teach street law, or legal first aid, if you will, to Newark citizens. And I'm proud to say that our students drafted an ethics policy which was recently adopted by the Newark Civilian Complaint Review Board. We're going to continue to work with that Newark Civilian Complaint Review Board, despite recent setbacks that it suffered, to draft policies, draft procedures, and that sort of almost completes the circle, because the Newark Civilian Complaint Review Board was suggested to be started by the commission that reviewed the rebellion in 1967. It's only been adopted. We haven't had a first meeting of that board yet, but only now, this past year, has it been authorized to proceed. So the struggle continues.
Good afternoon. My name is Rachel Godsil, and this is my first year at Rutgers Law School. I'm here as a result of my colleague Elise Boddie, with whom I was also a lawyer at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and Elise, along with Chancellor Cantor, created social justice scholars, and I'm among the 3 social justice scholars so honored to be part of this community. And the work that we were invited here to do involves some of the interdisciplinary work that Chancellor Cantor described. And so for the last 10 years, I've been working with a group called the Perception Institute to try and answer the question of why is it in every domain that matters in any of our lives, in schools, in healthcare, in the workplace, in criminal justice system, in every area that we care about, why is it that even people who have egalitarian values, even people who think of racism as wrong, we still see outcomes within those contexts, within our schools, within our healthcare institutions, we still see outcomes that are utterly inconsistent with those values. And so there are 2 possible answers. One is that those of us who are white like me and who claim that we think racism is wrong are lying, and that's possible. But the social psychology suggests there may be another answer, and this answer gives us some hope. That answer is that because of the residential segregation in housing, because of the residential segregation in educational systems, people have a set of biases, a set of stereotypes that we hold about people who we don't know on a day-to-day basis that affects every decision that we make. And so addressing implicit bias, these automatic stereotypes, is what we're now doing in the criminal justice system. Prosecutors in Charlotte, North Carolina, and in Los Angeles, and in Houston, and in Dallas, and we're seeing some real progress with prosecutors, with judges across the country, with Florida judges wanting to change their sentencing patterns. And then the final project that I'll describe is one that answers the precise question that I was asked to address, is what can interdisciplinary work do, and how can we understand how implicit bias works? We're working with the Boston Public School District and the Kalamazoo Public School District with the Rutgers Psychology Department to try and understand actually 3 questions, because bias is one component of what gets in our way, but so is something called racial anxiety. The anxiety people feel when engaging across group, where if you're a person of color, the worry is, am I gonna experience discrimination or hostility or some sort of invalidation? And frankly, for those of us who are white, I'm worried that I'm gonna be seen as racist. But what that means that I do is I take a step back. I don't have eye contact. I don't treat people with the kind of dignity and respect and belonging that every teacher needs to treat every child. And so we're gonna look in these public school districts and see, what's the phenomena? What's happening in schools where teachers care that's preventing the teachers from doing what they want to do? And what interventions can we create that will create the opportunities for all of our schools to provide the opportunities they need, whether they're integrated or not? If people are in the same building together, but the many, many white teachers don't know how to create engagement with children that allow them to learn, the effects aren't going to work. So this interdisciplinary work we're able to do with the Rutgers Psychology Department, thanks to, again, Chancellor Cantor and the work that's happening in Rutgers, has the potential nationally and then hopefully to be brought back to New Jersey, because we only go where we're invited. We're like vampires. So someone has to invite us in and say, we're interested in the work that you do. We want to see if these interventions can actually have some real effects. We're so grateful to be part of this amazing community of scholars and activists and citizens, and again, all the MSP graduates who have done such extraordinary work. To be part of this community is essentially modeling what we hope can exist throughout the country. So thank you all so much. We're really delighted to be here.
Let me get another round of applause for these remarkable social justice scholars here. They all inspire me every day. And one of the most remarkable things is Rob Steinbaum and Dean Shen asked me to come in with 10 minutes for Q&A, and we have 10 minutes for Q&A. 12 law professors have spoke, and they said save 10 minutes, and we still have 10 minutes. That may be a first. So, questions from the audience? I would say all of us, that's probably true. Those of us in the clinic, we meet and we talk about what we do all the time. We do open houses where we pitch what we're doing to the students. So we have a pretty good idea, all of us in the clinics, what it is we do and how to interact and collaborate with each other. And you've heard from Laura and Sandra and Anjum and Joanne about terrific collaborations that are going on. There are also great collaborations that are going on, intra-campus as well as inter-campus too. But it was terrific to also hear what's happening in our centers and with our newest social justice scholars coming on board. I should say that we've already enlisted Rachel to teach implicit bias to all of our clinical programs as part of our regular seminar, because we think it's critically important that students engaged in hands-on representation have the chance to be exposed to this critical and important body of work and interrogate their own biases before going out into the world. Oh, what did you say? She's going to do it with all the students? Okay. Chancellor Cantor, Dean Chen, I think maybe a salary bump might be in line here, but I'll let Rachel make that pitch.
Hi, my name's Cheyenne Mirza-Haydar. Thank you so much for coming. I'm gonna fix this. So I'm a 2L currently, and I'm inspired by all the work that you do, but what are ways that students can help in the work that you do and then possibly carry on the torch as well? Thank you.
Anyone want to take that?
Well, traditionally what you did at Rutgers Law School was you took a clinic, and we're probably the best in the country at that and provide some of the greatest opportunities. But the center movement is still rather new, and so I can understand students not knowing how they can get involved. And there are a couple of ways you can get involved, and I'll just use mine, not because it's the most important, but because it's the model I understand, and others can speak for theirs. So what will happen with CLIMB is that there will be 2 or 3 points at which a student can enter. One would be to apply as a CLIMB fellow, which means we support you for a year monetarily, and you take my class and you engage in a project of your own making, and we around either some of the work that's already going on or something that you want to do. A second way to do it, though, is really almost in spot work. There are a number of projects, as we've developed, that really happen all of a sudden, and we need a deep analysis of community land trusts, because it's part of something that we're proposing to the city, and we're working with community groups to do something on the ground, and they need that. We're having that issue right now with helping the city to develop a civil right to counsel. So you might take that work, which we need, like an associate might need in developing a memo for a partner on a live issue. You may be engaged in that kind of relationship, or you may turn it into a broader scholarly project of your own.
Thank you.
More questions? Yes. You want to come up to the microphone here?
You didn't get a chance to get to your third area of expertise, stereotype threat. Could you just tell us briefly what that is?
Absolutely, thank you for asking. I was trying to do my 5 minutes and it was very challenging. So stereotype threat is a phenomena where we all have identity categories, some of which make us vulnerable in certain contexts. So for example, I come from a working class background, and so when I first went into practice and was with people who had sort of very Upper East Side backgrounds in New York, I actually did work of lesser quality because I had this cognitive dissonance in my brain where I thought they were looking at me as though I had bad table manners and didn't wash. And it literally divided my brain. I didn't know this in 1993, but there's a social psychological term that explains that phenomena, stereotype threat. So if you're in an environment that triggers this identity that you have and makes you feel like you have to manage that identity when you're engaged in a task that requires every bit of cognitive capacity you have, you're actually not able to put all those cognitive capacities to bear. So in terms of standardized tests, for example, if an Asian American woman is asked to check her ethnicity before she takes that math test, she does better than if she's asked to check her gender, because one of those identities have been made relevant. And so stereotype threat has been shown to explain some of the disjunctures we see between students of color's amazing capacity and what's actually reflected in certain tests. What's really exciting is there are a host of interventions that any of us in educational capacities and work capacities can put into play that can allow people's full capacities to emerge. And so our argument at Perception is we have to look at all three of these phenomena simultaneously: implicit bias, racial anxiety, and stereotype threat, because if we're not attacking them all together, then it's going to look like we're not making progress. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, come on up, David.
First of all, I want to say something that I didn't think was possible. I am more proud today of being a Rutgers alum than I was before. So as I listened to you, I'm thinking of the context in which we all live. And I know that there is a renewed attack on affirmative action being planned. I think they're former students or clerks for Clarence Thomas. So as I listened to you, it seemed to me that you have the basis to form the intellectual groundwork to show that affirmative action is not only constitutional, but that it is socially and historically necessary, not because of historical discrimination, but because every institution in the United States has participated in discrimination against people of color. So I'd like to know how we can help, whether it's to invite you to communities, invite you to corporations, invite you to wherever the heck it would help to build that foundation, because the attack is coming. We shouldn't wait to counterattack. We should build our own argument now.
Jon just handed the microphone to me because I've done a lot of work around affirmative action, and the attack never went away. It was attacked as soon as it was developed, and so I think you're absolutely right that we need to figure out a way to continue to gird affirmative action programs by making sure that they're not only legally compliant, but also supported, and to make sure that there continues to be a recognized demand for them. I gotta say, what the Trump administration is doing right now in terms of the courts of appeals and how they are packing the courts of appeals. Well, we're all talking about all this other stuff that's going on. They are gradually taking over the courts, so that's coming. Folks have to get out and protest and be visible about why this continues to be important, but you're absolutely right that we need for our business leaders, our institutional leaders, to continue to articulate why this matters so much and to reflect upon all the tremendous work that's been done here, because this is the legacy of what the MSP program has created, that power and recognizing all of this amazing untapped talent that this institution has groomed can be a model for the rest of the country. I believe there are no easy answers, but you're right. We have to be vigilant, and we have to be prepared, and we have to showcase everything that this wonderful institution has created.
Another question?
I just wanted to comment that this has been really beautiful hearing from all of you. As an alumni, it's really so moving to hear about the work that you're doing and who you are. It reminds me, and some of my classmates who are here with me have commented about how it reminds us of what we loved about Rutgers and MSP, why we came to Rutgers, what it taught us. It's the strong sense of justice, it's the love, and it's the dedication. And you are reminding us of that and reinvigorating us and re-inspiring us to continue that work. As alumni, I think I speak for many of us that we are here. Our hearts are with Rutgers and with MSP always, and we're here for you. And we would love to stay connected. I know for myself, that's certainly how I feel. And just throwing out an idea as possibly a podcast to keep connected with alumni, to let us know what's going on, because coming here and listening to you is really inspiring, and you've really progressed the work in terms of the deeper connections with Newark, the connections between Newark and Camden, the interdisciplinary connections, and it's really moving forward the work that is the legacy, and it's inspiring, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that remark. I just want to say very quickly, that's a beautiful thing to say, and there are about 40 to 50 more of us whom you have not heard from. Some of whom are in the audience. I just want to point, I can't name them all, but I just want to point to my colleagues. The depth of love and intellectual passion that you hear on this stage is shared by all of my Rutgers Law School faculty colleagues. This is an astonishing group of people who dedicate themselves very deeply to some of the most complex issues facing our society and internationally. And I wish you could hear from all of them. So what you're getting today, if you've enjoyed it, is just really just the tip of the iceberg.
Thank you, David. And in terms of staying connected with alums, I'm going to just speak to Liz Moore, who is right here, who gets out our newsletter about our clinics and information of what we're doing in our various social justice-oriented centers on a regular basis. There are probably ways to better integrate that with alums, but we're certainly putting out materials every year that describe or summarize what our accomplishments have been. We may have time for one more question. I see the dean is standing up. We have a line of folks here. Let's take one more.
This is just a comment. First of all, I just want to also compliment the dedication and the struggle here. This is great. I just wanted to make an historical reference here because in addition to the courage and boldness that was referenced with respect to the 69 law students, I was part of a class of 77 actually. My name's Rick Ford. I'm a legal services attorney. I've been working there for 35 years. And the involvement of students in 1976 in reaction to the Bakke decision, the mass demonstration we had, the conference on affirmative action that we had at the end of the year helped push the struggle forward. I want to just encourage students today to learn that history, to learn all the things that have been talked about up here, the things that were talked about in terms of the MSP deans, but also to learn the history from the students who were there at that time. Because it's a vibrant history, it's a strong history, and we were changed. Those of us who participated in that were changed for the rest of our lives. And that's what's going to change this system, is a group of people who see fundamental change as the long-term struggle. Thank you.
Thank you.
One last question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I am Savannah Potter Miller, former administrative law judge, but more importantly, I'm in the pioneering class of 1971 of Rutgers University Law School. This historic moment cannot be underplayed. If it were not for the outstanding and exemplary faculty of Rutgers University School of Law, and particularly under the leadership of Dean Willard Heckel and Assistant Dean Helen Hoffman, I would not have been here, and we certainly would not have had the success of that first class. So we could not have done it without the administration. President Mason Gross was president at the time, and the students could not have made it if we were not in the boat at the same time and roaring in the same direction. So I want to indicate that. Secondly, the first class was composed of 20 students. 10 were from the South and 10 were from the north of northern schools. I was one from Atlanta, Georgia, came up to Newark, didn't know what Newark looked like, never been to Newark in my life. However, it was the interest of a state university, not only interested in the impact that Rutgers had on New Jersey, but the impact that Rutgers had on the United States that brought us together. So I would like to salute every one of us and the history of Rutgers Law School for their achievement in this historic moment.
Hello, everyone.
And here's the one last question.
Oh, it's not going to be a question, it's an invitation. I'm so proud and overwhelmed at what you're accomplishing here in Newark. My name is Marilyn Askin, Frank Askin and I have endowed we've endowed the Clinical Legal Education Committee clinic here, all right? All right. If he can stand. We're just so proud of this. I worked for about 15 years as, well, I used to think of lobbyist as a very pejorative term, but I worked for AARP, so we were never paid at all. We paid with our votes. And all I'm saying is you're doing fabulous work here, but as a lobbyist here in New Jersey, it's peanuts here. It's easy. You have a receptive governor now. You have a wonderful legislator. It's easy. Frank retired a year and a half ago, and we decided to test the waters in Florida. And believe me, while you were shoveling snow, we were testing the waters. It was wonderful. But I'm also inviting you all, when you retire, to come down there. It's not just testing the waters. We're going to turn Florida into a blue state. And we need you. Frank has been working with ACLU, League of Women Voters. We got over 700,000 persons in Florida to sign up to get a motion on the ballot. We're going to need 60%, and that is for felony enfranchisement, and that's a very important thing. In addition, our tweeter-in-chief, or liar-in-chief, or whoever you want to call him, has inadvertently contributed to Florida becoming a blue state because he didn't realize that Puerto Ricans were Americans. And 300,000 of them have come to Orlando to settle. And we're going to register them, and Florida is going to become a blue state, and we need your help. Thank you.
My name is Lennox Hines. I am a graduate, an alumni of the MSP program, but I live now in Hilton Head, South Carolina. Marilyn inspired me to come and say a few words. And I want to pay tribute to my mentor, Frank Askin. Frank, I wanted to say this to you personally, and I thought that I would be unable to do so because I missed your retirement. I'm in Hilton Head, South Carolina. But because of you, I am a lawyer. Because of you, I was able to be a lawyer to Nelson Mandela. Because of you, I am who I am. I remember when you sat on the admissions committee. You, Joe Charles, and another faculty member by the name of John Hanks. And you interviewed me. I, at that time, was a research scientist from City Service Oil Company, and I thought I exemplified the type of student that Rutgers was looking for. At the time that I decided to go to law school, my son was an undergraduate at Cornell. I left one field of science to go into law. I don't think that I got John Hanks' vote, but I know I got your vote and that of Joe Charles. And I want to say before this body that I thank you for all that you have done. I also recall that when I was considered to be a full professor at Rutgers, you were on my special committee. And I know that you and Arthur Kanoy voted for me. So thank you very much, Frank. And I think of you often. Thank you.
Well, this has been such an amazing segment of an already amazing day. Our coffee break awaits, but first, at the risk of collective lack of humility, can you also acknowledge and thank again my colleagues for this really wonderful presentation?